So when I go to these events that I go to, I always have a jacket. And it's almost like when I get a new jacket or I go into my closet and wear what I call these gala jackets, it's almost to the point where people expect to see me all the time in a jacket. Matter of fact, a colleague saw me. They were like, Patrick, where's your jacket? I'm like, come on now. This is a Monday night. I'm not going to wear sequins on a Monday night.
Patrick, welcome back to Unmute the Voices. How are you?
Oh my goodness. Thank you for having me. Good morning. It's great to be here.
I'm so glad to have you back on this show. The last time you were on this show, we had such a good time. So I'm glad to get you back on to be able to talk to you about things that are going on in this world right now. There's so much going on. Oh my gosh.
Yes, it
How,
certainly is.
yeah, I'm telling you. So let's just kind of get right into it. You have had such a busy year, and I can't help but just wonder how you do it all. You hang out at the Met with different opera stars. I know recently you were there and you saw Latanya Moore, and you just see all these different stars, and you always have like the latest on what's going on with everyone. So, how have you been able to kind of cultivate this career where you are just in the know and you have just surrounded yourself around all of these celebrity opera stars?
You are too kind. I think the first thing that most people don't know about me, and they don't know me well outside of the lens of being a journalist, is that I am a singer myself. I had, my training in undergraduate and graduate school with both degrees in voice, and I had aspirations to be a singer. So I think that kinship and that affinity for vocal music in particular, it allows me to really network and really connect with, the singers in a way that just a typical person who may not be a vocalist may not have that, entree. And it's so funny that you mentioned Latonya Moore. Oh my goodness. I recently saw her not only at the Met, but I recently saw her in Philadelphia for the Marian Anderson Museum and Historical Society. They had their big reopening, and Latonya Moore was one of the Marian Anderson scholars. So she
Right.
was there at the gala. So, it's all about being yourself, being relatable. And people think that sometimes when you meet these opera stars that they're so unrelatable or they're up here and you're down there, but they are people. So if you just approach them, directly, I mean, you would get, a favorable response.
So I love the fact that you just mentioned that. I mean, for anyone who is interested in getting to know opera stars or just anyone really who's a star in classical music, what do they need to do?
Let me tell you something. I learned this a long time ago. I think sometimes that we put up these boundaries and these constructs that we say, oh, we can't reach out to this person because they're under management, or we can't reach out
Mhm.
to this person because they're at this level and I'm here. The only thing you have to do is send a note. And I'm gonna tell you something. I know a lot of people may not like me saying this, but on social media, you will find that a lot of these stars are approachable. They're on social
Right.
media. They want to have the exposure. So even if you inbox, a star, a star, as we're saying, on social media directly, you would be surprised to know that they will respond to you. That's how my career started. I used to think, oh, I have to go through this level, I have to go through this office to contact this person. But all it took was one realization one day, Patrick, just send them an email. And that's all you have to do. Make direct contact.
Mhm. So, like, if someone had a crush on a star, could they just like DM them? Could they slide into their DMs and
I don't
like,
think you should sign into a deal.
but why not though? I mean, there.
You're about to get me in trouble. I don't think you should slide in the DM about a crush, but if you slide in, hey, I admire your artistry. I mean, maybe you can couch it like that. Let's just say that.
Okay, fine. But there are some opera stars who are on the market though, who are single.
You know what? I'm sure, but I'm not gonna get myself or you in trouble by encouraging a dating scenario. I'm sure there's apps out here. If they want to get on the app, they can find out that way.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, but I mean, you see this time and time again. These opera stars, they, just opera in general is such a grand, artistry, and there's lots of pomp and circumstance that goes with that, and people could feel threatened or feel like um, I'm not worthy to reach out to them because of class or their own insecurities or maybe not feeling like they know enough about opera or just classical music in general. What would you say to someone and how they can kind of get over that fear of reaching out to someone directly?
I would say be your true authentic self. I think that is the appeal why people tend to gravitate towards me and feel comfortable, me being in their space, speak with them because, I mean, I don't feel like I put on. I mean, the Patrick D. McCoy that you get, at home is who you're gonna get, in the public, and of course with some constraints. But
Yeah.
I just feel like being your true authentic self. One of my many favorite opera singers who I feel is just so approachable, and even though they're a star, is Lawrence Brownlee. I
Okay.
met Larry because of my dear friend who's not with us anymore, Mame Hope. She was the mother of the great baritone Ben Hope, and she, fostered the careers of a lot of Black classical musicians, and in particular. But she was the one that introduced me to Lawrence Brownlee for the first time. I heard him for the first time with Washington
Mm.
Concert Opera. And, even me just being introduced or me speaking to him, just normal manners, that has fostered a relationship as far as, not only me reviewing or covering his concerts, every time I see him, it's almost like, seeing a friend, that you haven't seen in a long time. So I would just again say be your true authentic self, let go of the all of the airs and all of that kind of stuff. And just down home manners, as we would say in the South.
I love that. And shout out to Larry. We actually had him on one of our episodes of Unmute the Voices. And I know that he has a Kojic background. I was trying to get him I was trying to get him to sing some runs here, and I gave him a little bit of a hard time about Yolanda Adams, but I'm not gonna go there.
But it's funny you mentioned, his Kojic background and his singing in the church. I always tell people, we use a fancy word in vocal music, in classical vocal music. We call it coloratura. All the
Mhm.
florid passage work and all that. But if you think about it, all of the, the coloratura that you hear in Rossini, you hear in the gospel music of the Black church. And so it's wonderful that he can use his technique and facilitate that relationship to the two styles of music that really, in essence, it's one style.
I love that. Are there other opera stars that are hot right now that we should know about?
I have to mention this one because, again, just going back to my dear friend who I mentioned, when I first came to the DC area, I was pretty green as far as being exposed to the whole, what I would call the classical music firmament of DC, especially where it came to notable Black singers. And I'm going to tell you a name that if you don't know, you should know. And I think you probably already do. But for your listeners, Janine DeBeek.
Oh yeah.
Soprano Janine DeBeek. I'm gonna tell you something. I heard Ms. DeBeek probably 13 or 14 years ago. She was a young artist with a young concert artist. And my dear friend who I mentioned earlier, Mrs. Hope, her son Ben Hope, he won Young Concert Artist many years ago. So Mrs. Hope had a relationship with Susan Wadsworth, who was the
Oh
founder
yeah.
of Young Concert Artists.
Right.
And Janine DeBeek she was presented in concert at the Kennedy Center in recital as one of the young concert artists. And when I heard her all those years ago, I was just like, okay, nice recital. But now to hear her, it is a totally different voice. I mean, she is a star, in particular in the Baroque early music world. She's
Mm,
doing all of these concerts. Like you could go on social media any given day and see her, singing in Vienna or singing in Amsterdam and singing that music with such precision and excellence,
mm,
in that period style, which you don't get to hear a lot, based on, traditional training, especially hearing a Black singer
yeah.
really excelling in that early music world is just amazing. So Janine DeBeek is definitely one of them. If I could go on to name
Mm.
more, I definitely will. But Janine DeBeek is definitely one of them.
Well, you mentioned a star. What actually makes an opera star or just a star in classical music in general?
I think you have to be able to connect. I mean, the actual apparatus of the voice or the instrument, those things are fine. Of course, you
Hmm.
want to hear musical accuracy and beauty of tone and all of that. But I think at the core, you have to be a beautiful person. You have to be able to
Mm,
really connect that which you are trying to offer, as a musical offering. You have to have that ability to connect with your audience. And I think that outshines anything you could do on a technical matter. I think you have to have the ability to connect, and that's where your star will really shine.
so, for those who might be shy or feel like they love the music, but they may not necessarily be a people person, what sort of advice would you give them in how to become more open so that their star shines?
You know, that is kind of a tricky question for me because I've been on both sides of that coin. I was sharing with a friend of mine even recently. I remember when I was in high school, believe it or not, I was very shy. I was bullied and teased and all those things.
Hmm.
So I kind of retreated and was in the background. But I'm gonna tell you something. When I hit that stage, I was in my true element. When the spotlight came on, it was like I was two different people. So I
Mm,
think I'm saying all that to say, even now, people they assume, oh my God, Patrick, you're always with all these people. You're at this gala, you're at this embassy. They assume that I am always on. And I
mm,
think to answer your question, you have to know when to be off. You have to know when to switch that switch in yourself, that you're going to be inside yourself, be one with yourself, recognize the gifts that reside in yourself. And I
mm.
think that when you recognize the gifts that reside innately in you, then you will be able to connect with other people because you will be able to see yourself in other
Mm.
people.
That's interesting that you mentioned that because I had Janae Bridges on recently, and she was talking about how she creates almost this alter ego when she's on stage that's a completely different person, a character that is very different than who she is in real life. And it sounds like what I hear you saying is almost kind of creating this alter ego when you're on stage versus when you're off stage, right?
Yeah, and even though I'm not on stage all the time, I guess I'm, in my career, as you said, I have different facets of my career. I'm a church music director and organist. So people at church, they see me one way. I have on my cassock and surplice, and I'm the high church Anglican, organist. And then other people see me, for instance, to speak to your thought about alter ego. I'll tell you a prime example. People have gotten accustomed to me being in all these different jackets. So when I go to these events that I go to, I always have a jacket. And it's almost like when I get a new jacket or I go into my closet and wear what I call these gala jackets,
Mhm.
it's almost to the point where people expect to see me, all the time in a jacket. Matter of fact, a colleague saw me. They were like, Patrick, where's your jacket? I'm like, come on now, this is a Monday night. I'm not gonna wear sequins on a Monday night. So I think, to Janae's point, and I love Janae. I have seen her blossom ever since she was in the conservatory project, which was like a major initiative for students when they were in the conservatory. They had like a residency at the Kennedy Center. So I've
Mhm.
known her for quite a while, and now she's this two-time Grammy award-winning
Right.
singer. But just to get back to your point, I think it's very important that you compartmentalize and you have this alter ego. Some people was, I'm just going to say this like this, and I hope it's taken as it's been taken. Some people will probably say, "Oh, they being fake.
Mm.
Oh, they being fake. Or they being pretentious. Or when he's
Mm.
here, he's this way,
Mm.
and when he's there, he's that way. Oh,
Mm.
he faking. He's stunned.
Mm.
I don't see it that way. I think that it's about
Mhm.
being. I mean, just like when you go to a job, and I know we're going to talk about all these things, but like when you go to a job, certain jobs, I'm sure that people have heard the term code
Code
switching.
switching.
When you're at the
Yep.
job, it's, oh, hi, how are you? Oh, great. And then when you with your friends, it's like, oh, yo, what up? You know what I'm saying? So I think for me,
Yep.
it's about being not only appropriate for where you are, but being appropriate for who you are.
That's right. That's right. And there's a time and a place for everything. And not everyone should have access to all sides of you all the time, right?
That's exactly right.
Mhm.
Like our
Mhm.
last conversation, we were talking about we were being a little controversial. Our last conversation, we were talking about Handel and my favorite diva, and I was saying that if you came to my house, you might catch me eat some chicken wings. I mean, with my hands, that might not be appropriate at an embassy.
Mm.
Or if it is, let me know.
I know that's right. Unmute the Voices is sponsored by Key to Change Studio. Key to Change Studio is a violin and viola studio located in Renton, Washington, which allows middle and high school underserved students living in South King County an opportunity to take violin or viola lessons. For more information, visit their website at keytochangestudio.org. Now, back to Unmute the Voices. You're in the DC area, and so you're in kind of the hotbed of just a lot of controversy regarding the current affairs of our government. In your opinion, with so much disruption that's happening with artists and arts organizations losing federal funding, what sort of advice can you give people in what appears to be a time of despair, fear, and discouragement?
That's a real difficult and probing question because on one hand, we're outraged. We're outraged with the way and the manner in which the Kennedy Center, for example, if we're talking about the Kennedy Center,
Hmm.
that was taken over, the way that the president of the Kennedy Center was unceremoniously, relieved of her duties, and then members of the board. And if I may say and speak very candidly, Deborah Rutter to me is a rock star in the arts. Matter of fact, when I was writing for Washington Life as the performing arts columnist, I had the magnificent pleasure of interviewing her when she was in transition from being at the Chicago Symphony coming to DC. So I know her work well, and the arts world knows her work well. So to see that kind of you know deliberate intention and unseating her as president, it's something that we have not seen, in the arts world, not only in DC, but I would say in the arts world,
Yeah.
period, this kind of thing. And I'm sure similar things may have happened, but I guess this really strikes a chord. But what I would say, to the arts community, we still need to support the establishment of the arts. And what do I mean by that? I used to work at the Kennedy Center. Believe it or not, I used to sell tickets in what they call instant charge. So
Mm,
people would be surprised to know that I knew so much about the arts and things like that. But my point is, it takes so many moving parts. We see just the performer on the stage, but you have the people who work in the office, you have the stage hands, you have the people who work in lighting, you have the people who work in the administrative offices, you have the security, you have the custodians. And I feel that if we don't support the whole institution of the arts, we have the ability to really negatively affect those who make a living or those who support their families financially through places such as the Kennedy Center and other bastions of artistic expression. So I would say, it's a double-edged sword. On one breath, we are totally outraged. It's easy for us to say, hey, we're not going to go to the Kennedy Center anymore. And there's a lot of moral implications that happen as well. As you saw, Hamilton pulled their whole run from the
right.
Kennedy Center. Issa Rae pulled her performances. But one thing I will say, and then I'll stop here. I was happy, very happy, even though I didn't get a chance to make this performance. I had a emergency. I was happy that Karen Slack, soprano Karen Slack, went on with her performance
Mm,
because that was a statement in itself of artistic excellence, not only just in opera or classical music, but the fact that you have this Black sterling artist who has the right to be there at the Kennedy Center.
right.
And I was glad that no disruption happened that would deter her from making that wonderful debut. And in fact, the recital I heard was, it was well received. It featured Black composers, and it was a statement of artistry. So I guess I'll end my statement, again by saying that as much as we are totally outraged with the state of what's going on. At the same time, I think it's very important that we still support the institution of the
Mm,
arts, not
mhm.
necessarily what's going on with it.
So, what would you say then for artists that are feeling scared? Do you think that well, what should they do? What should they do? I mean, we know Karen continued her performance at the Kennedy Center, and I think what you just said was so eloquently said, about her continuing to do that performance and showcase the music of Black composers, more even specifically Florence Price, who she recorded that music, which earned her the Grammy Award. But for other artists who may not be, at the same kind of career trajectory as Karen, um, what do you say to them who are afraid? What do they do?
I'm glad that you used the word afraid because I have been thinking about this and I'm really thinking about it today. Because if you remember,
Mm,
5 years ago today, and really the days that preceded, we all were afraid because COVID-19 hit and we didn't know what we were going to do.
yes.
And, I better be careful because, during COVID, I found that in our fear, we all came together. We didn't know how we were going to teach at these universities. We didn't know how we were going to, perform publicly. We just
Hmm.
didn't know. And we all were afraid and we all pulled together.
Yes.
And so I would say during that time of fear, COVID taught us a lot. It taught us, first of all, that we could operate and just be, in our own being. As far as, a lot of times when you're trying to enter big stages or you're trying to be discovered or you're trying to get your material out there, you're trying to go through somebody. But COVID taught us only thing you needed was your computer and your social media and your network and your microphone and your webcam, and you could just plow ahead. Um, so I would say to, again, if to the person who's afraid, I would say keep going, keep doing,
Mm,
what you are doing, because now, as I mentioned, that if we navigated COVID and we discovered all these tools,
mm.
now it's the time to put these tools into place and to really um, exercise our whole being as an individual artist.
And, I think underneath all of that is relationships.
That is definitely important. And I'm gonna go ahead and go here. And I said I was gonna, I wasn't gonna go here. But Q, I feel, and I might get in trouble with this, but I don't know if your editing is gonna help. But
Go for it.
I just feel that sadly, with all the lessons that COVID-19 taught us 5 years ago, I feel like, COVID brought us all closer together. We were all held captive in our homes. We were just, the computer screens had our rapt attention. We were just finding out when the next live was going to happen with a performance. And we was really, supporting each other. But sadly to me, since you mentioned that word also of relationships, I just feel like as much as the lessons were taught during COVID, I think a lot of the lessons were also lost. I think there's still a lot of gatekeeping going
Mm,
on. And not only, a lot of times we're guilty to say that the gatekeeping is being done in white classical music America. But sadly to say, I feel also that in the Black classical music space, that same gatekeeping goes on.
uh,
And I think that that is something that I think that really needs to be addressed. Whether we want to address it or not, it definitely is. Because I feel that now that people are going back to these major halls and stages, they are not really focus on the other people who were suffering during COVID. They have their platform now, and now they're moving out. So, uh, as it relates to relationships, I think the gatekeeping is something that still needs to be addressed. And it is not just black or white. For me, it is the whole arena of classical music. And now that we're having these discussions about DEI and diversity, equity, inclusion, and all those things being pulled out of the equation, it makes me wonder, like, where is your seat at the table? For
hmm.
me, I'm not looking for a seat at the table. I know that I am the table.
I know that's right. I know that's right. And I'll say that I think you're absolutely right as far as like gatekeeping, and that there seems to be a we forget about the past. We forget when we're doing well, we forget about those times when we weren't doing well or those people who helped us. And so, what do we need to do to stop the gatekeeping? Do we need to call people out? Like, what needs to happen in order to stop the gatekeeping from happening?
I don't know if that would be the best thing to do. The only thing I could do is what I gathered from when you were leading into your question.
Mhm.
Um, there have been so many people who have helped me and who have nurtured me and who have instilled the interest that I have in music, and in particular classical music, that I know for a fact that if it had not been for their tutelage, if it had not been for their nurture and time, I would not be where I am today as as a choral director, as an organist, as an arts journalist, as someone who really has their finger on the pulse of classical music. So I think it starts at home. I think it starts with recognizing those people in our lives. And I know a lot of times we like to think about these other people who are way up here at the trailblazers. But
Hmm.
for me, it starts at home. Even when I think about my late mother, it starts with her for me. She was the one that really centered my ear as far as being exposed to the spirituals and gospel music of the church. And then that translated to me having, other experiences, in other churches and, academic settings and things of that nature. So I think that just, to your point of recognizing those who have come before us, recognizing those who have kind of pulled us up our bootstraps,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
that is the way that I feel like that you really acknowledge. And when you do that, you will have more interest, I feel, in pulling somebody else along. When I go to these concerts, I just went to a wonderful concert here in DC. It was by a chamber choir here called Cantate, and the conductor and I were actually featured on a recent interview. But the reason I'm bringing that up, they had this initiative called Lit Every Voice, which is
Hmm.
their immersion uh, experience for young artists, and where they gave the young artists an opportunity to perform oratorial repertoire with chamber orchestra. So the first half of the concert was the young artist with the chamber orchestra, and then the choir performed their piece. But I'm saying all of that to say, you know I made it a point to be at that program because I knew those young artists, and I thought that it was important for them to look out in the audience and know that I was there. And if they didn't recognize that I was there, that was fine. But I made it a point that after this performance to let these young artists know
Hmm.
that I was there, because everyone doesn't start out on the stage, a
Right.
star. It begins with the mentorship and the tutelage, of someone, who has taken time to mentor you. So uh, I think it starts with recognizing those who have laid the groundwork for you, so that you can do the same for somebody else.
Well, that's gospel to my ears. Thank you so much for being on our show today. I really appreciate it. It's great to have you back and to hear your words of wisdom, especially on what's just going on right now in our country.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. And I want to, congratulate you, Q, for what you do.
Mm.
You do the very thing that you just asked me about. You're pulling these young violin students along, and they're getting to be in these prestigious spaces. So I just want to thank you, and I want to hope that,
Mm.
I hope that you will continue to do what you do in that vein.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor. I feel so blessed and lucky to have a career in this business, and I've been at it a long time, and I don't take any of it for granted, and I'm incredibly grateful for all of this work, and especially doing this work with Unmute the Voices, because I get to talk to people like you and learn and then be able to share all of this information with people who may not have access to it. So thank you so very much for being on our show today.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you as well for watching this episode of Unmute the Voices. I'm Dr. Quinton Morris, and I hope you enjoy your day.